I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Robert Brunner.
What design will do, good design, great design, will shrink the gap between the institution and its constituents. And when something is delivered that performs well in a person's lives and brings delight and joy and solves a particular issue, sometimes whatever, when you do that, you sort of create this very strong connection that people have with things.
An early designer at Apple and lead designer of Beats by Dre, Robert Brunner is a globally acclaimed product designer with over 40 years of experience. Robert built the pioneering internal corporate design organization, Apple IDG for Apple, and was a partner at the world's largest design consultancy, Pentagram. Under his leadership, Ammunition has developed iconic products such as Lyft's in-car icons, the Square Stand, and Polaroid's latest digital photography line. Robert has been named one of Fast Company's most creative people in business and is the co-author of the book, Do You Matter? How Great Design Will Make People Love Your Company. My interview with Robert Brunner is coming right up, but first...
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hi, I'm Jason Falls, the executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. As you probably know, Asheville and western North Carolina were nearly destroyed by Hurricane Helene in late September. The Red Cross has deemed this a Category 7 disaster, which is the largest category they give. One of our member podcasters, Patrick Casale, is on the front lines there. He's an Asheville native who is living through and witnessing the trauma, destruction, and recovery his family, friends, and fellow community members are going through. Patrick started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for relief efforts. All donations through Patrick's fundraiser go to local nonprofits who are helping with supply runs. Donations there directly impact people in need. I've given to the fund personally. Patrick has given as well, despite the fact he's having to recover too. The Marketing Podcast Network wants to help, and we know you do too. Visit Patrick's campaign at bit.ly/WNC help. The abbreviation is for Western North Carolina, WNC. bit.ly/WNC help. Any amount goes a long way. Even just $5 can provide a few gallons of clean drinking water to a family in need. Please join us in helping the relief and recovery efforts in Asheville and western North Carolina. Go to bit.ly/WNC help today and contribute. That's bit.ly/WNC help. The full URL, bit.ly/WNC help. Donate what you can. Every dollar helps.
Robert Brunner, welcome to On Brand.
Well, thanks, Nick, and thanks for that great introduction. It's pretty comprehensive and elaborate.
Well, we're known for our comprehensive and elaborate introductions, which I'm going to use as a setup for asking a very elementary question. But your career fascinates me. How does someone end up in product design? Was it a linear path, or was it sheer happenstance?
It was both. It is actually a great story, right? And I'll try not to make it too long, but it goes back, like most things, you go back to childhood. And I had a really interesting home in that my parents were both very creative people in different ways. My mother was she was originally a fashion model, and she got married and had kids, but continued to be a very creative person. It was a crafts person, artist, entrepreneur. She just was always making and doing things. my father was a mechanical engineer, a very creative one. He actually created, he worked at IBM and created a lot of the mechanical technology that made the first disk drives a mass item, right? And but he was always same thing, building something, making something, build boats in our driveway. I mean, so our home was just like a series of projects. That's kind of the environment I grew up in. I didn't think it was weird or abnormal. It was just what we did, right? So, but fast forward to, you're in high school, you finish, you go see the guidance counselor, and, he looked at my transcripts and said, "Oh, you're good in math and science. Your father's an engineer. You should be an engineer." It's okay, great. So I went off and enrolled in engineering school at San Jose State University. Did not like it. My father was pleased, loved helping me with my calculus homework, but I just felt like there was a part of my soul that was just being ignored, and that was the artist side. And I decided I would rebel and go over to the art building. And, and I'd heard about this thing called graphic design. And I thought, well, it was some form of commercial art, right? And so I thought, well, I'll go check that out. And I walked into the building, and there was this display case full of industrial design work, right? So renderings, models, sketches. And I just sat there and looked at it, and I was like, okay, this is it. Went and changed my major and never looked back. And then, but when you start to realize, if I look back at my childhood, I was the youngest. My parents were busy. I spent a lot of time in the garage making things, building bicycles. I did paintings. I did drawings. I did all these things, but never really added it up to that's a career path, right? But ultimately, I figured out, this is what I'm supposed to do, and it's making things, right? And that's what I continue to be obsessed with. And whether it's designing something for a partner or a client that's going to be made in the thousands, 10,000s, 100,000, millions, or whether it's just making one thing, right? Designing an interior, whatever. It's just about making stuff, and that's kind of my calling.
So you talk about this path, and it very much sounds like there's this moment of I'm where I'm supposed to be. Was there a moment, a project that you were working on that, while you were feeling directionally on the right track, that really brought that into relief for you?
Yeah, it was really clear, and it really was the thing that really launched my career. So, I started working at a design firm while I was in school. My roommate worked there. He got me a job in the model shop, making sanding and doing Bondo and stuff like that. But I had this, and I think that I got this from my father. My father's a very kind man, and obviously very intelligent and talented. But he sort of had this, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness kind of attitude around things, and I adopted that. And so I just started, even though I wasn't actually asked to, involving myself in projects as opposed to just working on the models. And so I eventually got, early in my career, like I was probably 22 or 23, got to be leading some projects. And I received this project. It was for a personal computer. Now, I'm going to date myself, right? But this was like back in 1983. And so it was the early IBM PC time, right? And everything was, this beige box. And this was a startup company called Mindset. And they were doing a computer entirely for creatives, right? And really high graphics processing power for that time. And so I just remember, and it was one of those situations where everything just clicked with the client and the object and its purpose, and just felt this flow, literally. Like, it was totally. I think actually in all my career I've had few things that have gone so smoothly, and it just happened and fell together and was just, and ended up being selected to be in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Won arguably the largest, the most prestigious design prize in the world at the time. And it's just, so here I am at this, ripe old age of, I think when it finally launched, I was 24, but it really showed me some things about following your intuition and understanding the sort of dynamics of a working relationship and really flowing. And so that was, I think, as much as, the finding the display case in the art building, that project really just sort of said me, okay, this is the thing, right? And I know how to do this, and it can come out really well, right? So that was like it was an amazing moment for me to have that happen, and it built some confidence that I've managed to hang on to now for like 40 years.
Definitely confidence that you have been able to hang on to and used as a springboard in some of the brands that you've worked with and in support of are certainly ones that we would think of when it comes to design, Apple and Square. But I have to. My children and wife will come for me if I don't ask about the experience of being a lead designer of Beats by Dre.
Yeah, how long do you have? It's there's such a suitcase full of stories around that. It could go on for an hour easily just on that topic. Yeah, amazing experience. Literally, and I'm still working. It's been almost 20 years, which is insane. When I look back from when I first started, first met Jimmy Iovine, and of course Dr. Dre. But it just an entire roller coaster through all kinds of things, and then eventually the acquisition by Apple, and we still continue to develop the products working with Apple. We've now had a near 12-year relationship of being a design firm working for Apple, which is actually highly unusual, right? So it's what do you want to start at the beginning and understand how it happened?
Sure, that's what I was going to say. If it would produce too much, I think starting from the beginning would be just a great snapshot of how it started.
Okay, yeah, I was introduced by a third party who had somehow gained knowledge that Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine were interested in producing audio products. Right? And so I was asked to attend this meeting down at Universal Music in Santa Monica. And just like, so here I am, like Silicon Valley design geek, and all of a sudden I'm sitting at a table with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, arguably the greatest producer the music industry has ever seen, and it was just wild, right? And what happened then was Dr. Dre said one thing, right? We ended up putting on the box for maybe 8 years, which was, people aren't hearing my music. And when we dove into that, what he meant was, Dre is a perfectionist, especially as an artist and producer, and he will spend an enormous amount of time crafting a single song. And his beef was, it goes out, and I'm going to quote, people listen to it on those crappy white earbuds, right? Which the crappy white earbud company eventually acquired them. But but his thing was, look, no one is creating headphones or audio playback devices that are designed to support our genre music, right? Which is predominantly hip hop and rock, right? It just wasn't there. The high performance headphones were like Bose is your dad's headphone, right? There was nothing for the audience, right? That really replicated the music as it was intended, and they felt their secret weapon was, we know how it's supposed to sound. Right? And then the other thing which became apparent to me was that headphones are a really interesting thing. They're incredibly difficult to design, and they are probably the most accepted piece of wearable technology, especially on your head. Right? It's really hard to get people to wear something on their heads. Just look at Google Glass and things like that, right? And so But when I looked at them, they've all been designed, rightfully so, from a viewpoint of functionality. They need to, of course, be comfortable. They need to have good acoustic performance. They need to be durable. They need to be highly adjustable. There's just this entire list of things they need to perform to be a good product. And because of that, they all ended up looking very mechanical, right? Sort of like these articulated pieces of machinery you put on your head. And I remember I had this printout of a headphone. It was this typical thing with a lot of joints and extensions. And I remember drawing a line from ear to ear, just saying, what if all that could be cleaned up? And what if it actually looked good on the head, right? As opposed to just being a functional thing, it became a thing of beauty on its own, but also when you wore it. Right? And then that was really the genesis for the design of the headphones.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Hi, I'm Jason Falls, the executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. As you probably know, Asheville and Western North Carolina were nearly destroyed by Hurricane Helene in late September. The Red Cross has deemed this a Category 7 disaster, which is the largest category they give. One of our member podcasters, Patrick Casale, is on the front lines there. He's an Asheville native who is living through and witnessing the trauma, destruction, and recovery his family, friends, and fellow community members are going through. Patrick started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for relief efforts. All donations through Patrick's fundraiser go to local nonprofits who are helping with supply runs. Donations there directly impact people in need. I've given to the fund personally. Patrick has given as well, despite the fact he's having to recover too. The Marketing Podcast Network wants to help, and we know you do too. Visit Patrick's campaign at bit.ly/WNC help. The abbreviation is for Western North Carolina, WNC. bit.ly/WNC help. Any amount goes a long way. Even just $5 can provide a few gallons of clean drinking water to a family in need. Please join us in helping the relief and recovery efforts in Asheville and Western North Carolina. Go to bit.ly/WNC help today and contribute. That's bit.ly/WNC help. The full URL, bit.ly/WNC help. Donate what you can. Every dollar helps. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show.
Then the third leg of the three-legged stool was that Jimmy, who is a marketing genius and really, understood the idea of cultural relevance, and that he was going to, in the same way that he would promote an artist, the same way he would promote Lady Gaga, whoever, he was going to do the headphone, right, and just really insert it into the cultural conversation around music and artistry. And when you combine those three things together, it just turned out to be explosive. And but those first years were wild. I mean, first of all, they had no idea how to make something, make a product in volume, deliver it out into the world. So it was really painful getting that first product done, because they really would just want to change all kinds of stuff at the last minute, reset. It just took probably twice as long as it should, because there was a lot of learning involved. But Jimmy stayed very focused and very well on sort of getting it right, and we did. We were pretty close to getting it right. It's hard to get it absolutely 100%. We were pretty close on the first version, and and then we'd have these design reviews where Will.i.am would show up, or Pharrell, or Oliver Stone, or it's just which was crazy. It was exciting and interesting, and a lot of times really good. But then, if someone of that degree would make a comment about it that was negative, or they didn't like it, or thought it should be something else, then all of a sudden you were spending a month trying to unwind that, right? Because it's so but it was just like fascinating and incredible. And but we got the studio, the first product out, and for a couple quarters it chugged along and did well. And then all of a sudden, again, the sort of Jimmy's planting of this idea that literally every music video that went out of Universal Music had the headphone in it in some way, right? It just all of a sudden went insane. And we started doing different versions and just product after product. And within a fairly short time, it became $1 billion enterprise, which was like drinking from a fire hose. And it literally took over our office, which was amazing because we, as an organization, we were doing so many things to help make this thing successful. We really learned so much beyond just the core product design on what it takes to make and deliver something amazing out into the world. And it was just an incredible experience, incredible friendships that are lifetime friendships, and just an enormous amount of fun.
So in that amazing story, you mention the friendships, the long-term collaboration. I want to come back to something that you mentioned a little earlier as well. When we talk about organizations and products known for design, Apple, Beats, and looking at the longevity and looking at it through the lens of design, there could be an assumption that and again, I'm cringing a bit saying it, but to, quote, keep it fresh, that you would need to change it up when it comes to design. How have you managed to build such long-term, leading in all senses of the word, design relationships with organizations like this?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things in there. One is sort of talking about what makes a design idea extensible over a long period of time, and I'll come back to that one. But the relationship side, I found is actually really key to success in design. It's something that gets overlooked quite a bit. The fact of the matter, when you're producing anything, especially a product, especially a high volume product, that's made in, as I said, 100,000, million, right? There is an army of people that bring that out into the world. I mean, hundreds, right? Sometimes thousands, right? That are all involved in the process around doing that. So I coined this phrase in the book you mentioned called the experience supply chain, right? And it's not a supply chain in the sort of typical sense, but then along that course of delivering something out in the world, as it flows through all those people, right? You have to maintain a idea that everyone to some degree understands, and that it's important to maintain this boundary condition around this design, because anything that moves through a system, often suffers what I like to call the death of 1,000 cuts, right? You make all these micro compromises, and then you get to the end, it doesn't look like anything you started with, right? So if you have that understanding, and that understanding actually comes back to leadership, right? And the leadership, driving something through that system, and having to understand that this design is one of the primary goals, that we deliver it in this way, is what makes it happen. And so, in my career, working with the people that get that, right? The people that show that leadership. And it's actually the topic of my second book I'm working on, which is tentatively titled Making Great, right? What does it take to move from something from good up to great? And it is always that leadership. And so those relationships you form and the trust that you form is incredibly important. I just had a call yesterday with a client we're working with, and sort of, it's early and there's a lot of sort of learning, and they said, what can we be doing differently, right? And my business partner and I were talking to him. We said, well, the model that you're working in, which is predominant, is we're on one side of the table and you're on the other side of the table, and you're going to give us information, and we're going to go do stuff around that information and come back and show it to you, and you're going to say that's right or wrong, and we like it, we don't like it, and then we'll go back and forth. And that's a very standard model in the creative industry. But the model that really works, that we practice with people like Apple and so forth, is we're actually on both on the same side of the table, right? And we're both in this together, and we're both working to deliver something amazing. And we're going to do what it takes and work together on a daily, hourly basis to continue to drive this idea towards coming out in the world. And it's a very important shift, right, in mindset. And that is, again, relationship stuff. You have trust, you have respect, you have integrity, you have all these things that are really important to relationships in this business creative context. And honestly, it is the difference between getting something out that's okay and something that's amazing. And every time I look at it, it's the same thing. So the book is about this idea that, what are the behaviors that leaders have that take something from good to great, from just doing its job to changing the world. And it's really consistent over the, literally hundreds of projects I've done. The percentage that turned out to be amazing, maybe 10%. It's all good, but the ones that were great were driven by this sort of mindset and these individuals that understood this.
At the risk of asking you another question that could prompt the follow-up of how long do you have, I'm glad that you only easy questions here on the On Brand podcast. I'm glad you brought it back to your book because I wanted to get to part of the title in there that intrigues me of how great design will make people love your company. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in a general sense, we will nod along at, yes, good design. But there's still some people out there. You talk about the differences in leadership that will still view it as a nice to have as opposed to a need to have. Talk about how design really moves the needle when it comes to building an emotional connection with your audience.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was leading to there. So if you step back, I think a lot of people don't understand brand and what that means, right? They look at the artifacts and the representation, your identity, your packaging, your product, your retail experience, right? They think all of that is a brand, right? Those are just methods and means. What a brand is a gut feeling, right? You have this feeling in your heart about something, right? And I always say, when two people have the same gut feeling, you have a brand, right? So the important thing to recognize about that is you can't make people feel a certain way, right? You can't force them to feel a certain way. You can only influence it, right? So if you're trying to build this idea in people's hearts, and it is a very emotional thing, we all think we make product purchase judgments intellectually. Always at the bottom of that is like, okay, this thing is making me feel good. What design will do, good design, great design, will shrink the gap between the institution and its constituents, right? And when something is delivered that performs well in a person's lives and brings delight and joy and solves a particular issue, sometimes whatever. When you do that, and do it charismatically, even better, right? You sort of create this indelible this not indestructible, but very strong connection that people have with things. When I used to lecture, I used to do a class at Stanford for a while, and I used to, in the beginning of the class, I'd ask the students this question, and this was back a decade and a half ago, and I'd say, okay, how many of you would care if Dell computer went out of business today? And one guy would raise his hand. And then I'd say, how many of you would care if Apple went out of business today? And the whole class would raise their hand. Well, why do you care? What does it matter? And it was always like, oh, it makes me feel this way, and I'm able to do this, and I'm, these are the, and all very emotional ideas around what this product could mean and what it means in their lives. And, and that I use that as an idea to sort of be in a bit, okay, well, how are the design of these things? And I mean, not just the physical design, but the software, everything. How is that affecting that, right? And that's when design becomes very powerful, right? And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is certainly, that's really what that book was about, and the sort of it was interesting with choosing that title, Do You Matter, right? Sometimes we got confused with people thought it would end up in the self-help section. But it was really about this, what's the difference of mattering in someone's lives or not mattering, right? As a company, right? And the way, no matter what you do, and I don't care if you're producing products, producing services, a medical technology company, right? You have to view design as that interface plane between you and the outside world. And everything you put out in the world matters in small ways or big ways. So if you view that as anything that we put out in the world, any message, anything, any piece of material, it needs to be doing the best job it can to communicate and connect with our audience. And that's what design does. So long-winded explanation, but that's how I usually try to explain it to people.
Your classroom experience and really just the general definition and rule of thumb there of making people feel good is a great segue for me to ask you, Robert, for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Yeah, oh God, I always hate these questions because well, I'm always never prepared, but and it's always a tough thing for a designer to look at. Our home is up in the wine country, but I have an apartment in the cities because our office is in the city. So I'm at my apartment and I was just looking over. So and it's a product we designed. I'll be upfront, but it's a coffee machine. It's called the Terra Cafe TKO2. It's amazing, makes amazing coffee. But what always makes me smile when we do it is the interaction with the product. It's again, not blowing our horn, but graphically incredibly well designed. But it has an entirely appropriately personal tone of voice when it communicates with you. Not in these sort of over personal way that you kind of like, this is kind of tacky, but just enough to feel like you're actually communicating with the machine. And so that sort of delight, you go through the process of making your coffee and it delivering it to you. And it's a great, obviously, coffee experience that, it always, and even though we worked on it and I've been around the machines now for 3 years, they still, every morning when I use it, I get a smile because it just feels good, right? And that's why I answered that, because I'm looking across the room and there it is. So that's what made me smile today.
You're smiling, looking at this coffee maker far away, and I'm sitting here thinking a cup of coffee sounds wonderful. So that's how it works. Robert, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, our website for our company is ammunitiongroup.com. And there's certainly, a lot of information about our company and projects and so forth there. We also, of course, are visible on LinkedIn, but I think probably our Instagram at Ammunition Group and my Instagram at Robert D, as in Dennis Brunner. There tends to be a lot of fresh stuff that comes up pretty regularly about what we're working on and so forth. So I'd say those are the best places to look, and then just set up a Google, or we tend to get a fair amount of press on things that we've done and so forth.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Robert Brunner, thanks for being on brand with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Nick. It was really fun.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.